up, Oasis people? Welcome to the Oasis Podcast. We're back. New location, actually.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. Watching. Yeah, for those watching. If you're listening, you have no idea that we changed locations.
Maybe it sounds different.
I don't know. Dylan's? No, he's shaking his head no. He's listening. It doesn't sound any different. But you know me, I'm Brennen, and then this is Jaena, and we actually have a guest with us today. And I've been working to try and say your name right, but it's Melissa Vande Kieft.
Second one.
Vande Kieft.
Yes.
Sometimes the second time is what you need. I
Yes.
did, you know. But she is a local author here in Brookings, someone who we've been in contact over the last year talking about her book right here. I've got a copy of it, and so does Jaena. But it's Living in the Wait. And the subtitle for this one is How to Use the Delays in Life Differently. And it's a book you wrote this last year. And one I really enjoyed reading, and one we're excited to talk about just kind of the themes of it and some of the things that you've been walking through and the Lord's been teaching you. Yes. But let's do this first. Let's have you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're doing here today.
Yeah. So my name is Melissa, as you guys had already shared. And so I'm a local author, speaker. I'm also an event planner is kind of my day job, I like to say. So that'll give you a clue a little bit about maybe why waiting is so hard. Because when you're a planner, you like to have things organized and scheduled and things go according to plan. So that's just a little bit about kind of like my resume piece from that. Some kind of random facts I guess I like to share with people. I used to be a hair model.
What? Wow.
Yes, it's kind of a funny thing. My hair, if you can imagine, had been dyed bright orange, like orange from like
I am blown away that this is even
like
a thing.
Hunter orange.
Yes, yeah, like.
So like,
yeah.
Now I got a question. You know, like I got to figure this out.
Take you off.
Yeah. What kind of content do you produce as a hair model? Like, are you like back of the head, like shampoo
it was
commercials,
the whole thing.
or
no? So I was actually like in. So hairstylists will go to actual like shows. Like this one was in Omaha.
Okay.
And we would be on stage. So behind stage, they would be coloring our hair, cutting our hair.
Oh,
and
wow.
they had to, it was really fun because they would do it in stages, especially for my hair. It was a little bit longer at that time. They would do different cuts throughout the show. Like this was, I think, a two-day type of a hair show.
Wow.
So then they would cut it so then you could see kind of the stylist could see what you could do differently with the hair and that kind of thing.
Cool.
So the last time I was a hair model, they colored it orange and I was like, I'm done. Because after that, I had to color my hair like 2 or 3 times just to get
the
out.
orange out.
So here's a funny story for you. When I was in middle school, I dyed my hair blonde as a 7th grader for a soccer tournament I was participating in. It was our state championship. I thought it would be so cool, and it was terrible. You know, it looked awful. It wasn't cool at all. I honestly got bullied. Like, it was not okay. But then when I tried to get it back to my normal color, it took me months to get it back. Like, I tried to dye it back brown and it turned orange.
Yep.
And then eventually I just buzzed my head and let it come back naturally.
I didn't want to opt for that route myself. But
it was a tough couple of months. So, in some ways I relate.
It's a very difficult job when they color your hair.
Well, there you go.
I mean, you don't have you sign up for this, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have an option to say, hey, can you not? And I think, honestly, they made a mistake. I think exactly what happened, what you were saying about the hair color.
Yep.
I think it's supposed to be more of like an auburn maroon.
Okay.
More like natural.
They never told me that.
They're like, just roll with it.
Yeah. And I was like, well, what do I do now? It's done.
This is my hair.
Like, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of
Did you get paid to do that?
I did,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
at least you got some money.
Well, I used all my money to dye my hair back, honestly, after that whole game.
But you have this story to tell, right?
Exactly, and it's a funny story.
There you go.
Story.
That's awesome.
So it's always about the story. But so that's just a little kind of random fact about me. And I also wanted to share, I guess, my favorite Bible verse because I think that's always fun to hear from people. But mine is Isaiah 41:13, and it says, "For I am the Lord your God who takes hold of your right hand and says, 'Do not fear, I will help you.'"
That's good.
I don't know why. I mean, that's just always stuck with me, and I think it applies to what we'll maybe talk about today too. But I think what's cool about it is I think it talks about how personal your relationship with God is because he's taking your hand, he's holding your hand, and he's speaking to you, say that I will help you. So I love that verse. It's just something that really means a lot to me. So anyway, those are a couple very high level things about myself.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, should we get into our fun intro question?
Let's do it. We already did the hair stuff, so it feels like we've already done some fun. But
I got to know, if you were going to write a book or you were going to write a second book, what would you write about?
I've been asked this question before.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I would think I'd have to do something soccer related. But here's my niche, because you can't just publish a soccer book.
Just soccer.
I think soccer as a way of connecting people in Christ.
Okay.
So I've been on a couple mission trips. And there's this unique thing that I've gotten to do when I've been in Haiti or Puerto Rico or Kenya, all these different, even Southern Texas. There was such a cultural divide. Like when I was working in Phoenix one summer, I did a couple of weeks with some people who were immigrating to America, and we weren't able to speak the same language. They couldn't speak English, but they played soccer and I played soccer, and there was a really beautiful thing in it.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be my niche.
All right.
How soccer can transcend culture to be able to connect people. And
There you
using
go.
that for Christ.
You kind of already have a title a little bit.
Maybe.
Too. So.
Right? I got to get an outline now.
There you go.
I'll just listen to my podcast back, start writing it.
Yeah.
There you go. What about you?
I think mine, I've already actually thought about this.
Okay.
Would be a book for children on waiting.
Oh.
And we'll talk about that probably more as you find out about my story, but I have a daughter, and I feel like one of the things that I talk about and have to teach her often is waiting.
Yeah.
Right? Because kids don't understand it. They have no concept of time or anything. And so I just thought something like that could be kind of a fun way to talk about that topic and reach children as well. So I don't have an outline yet, but I did kind of have a title that I've been throwing around, but we'll see what happens. Maybe this will actually be me putting it out there. Now I have to follow through, right?
Here's my thing. So I got to ask this question.
Yes.
Is writing a book like the same concept as getting a tattoo? You know, they say you get one tattoo and now you're in, and you're like going to get multiple, right? You know what that happens though? It's like, oh, I'm never going to get a tattoo. And then someone gets one tattoo and they're like, I'm all in. I'm going to get 1,000 tattoos.
I don't have any tattoos. I've heard that from people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could see that from writing because it's a really fun process and like you grow personally yourself through it. So I could definitely see that. And I can't say for sure that I would feel the same way about it. If I had someone that was like doing all my writing and publishing and all of that, maybe I would. Like I did this from beginning to end. Yeah. Maybe it would be a different process, right? Because other people could help move it along faster.
Totally.
So we'll see how that works.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Jenna, what about you? What book are you writing?
I would definitely write something fiction.
Oh,
I don't
there you
know
go.
if I have expertise enough in something to write a nonfiction book. And I had this idea. It came to me at the middle of the night a long time ago.
Where it always happens.
When all the best ideas come.
When all the best ideas come. Of like a trilogy. So multiple books. So I don't know how many. But
trilogy is 3.
Or a series then.
Okay.
You're right.
Series.
Trilogy is
so then you
series.
can decide how many.
I don't know.
I'm going to read a trilogy of 6 books.
But every single book is the exact same story, but told from the different perspective of different characters. Is there a book like that already?
I don't know if there's a book like it, but I think I've seen a movie like that.
Is there? So like imagine like Harry Potter. Book 1 is Harry Potter. Book 2 is Ron. Book 3 is Hermione. Like it's all the same characters, the exact same plot, but from the different perspectives. So you see how they all engage it differently, and each of them's the hero in their own book.
Ooh, I like that idea.
So
trademark.
Trademark.
Right
Nobody
now.
can steal it.
Yes, that's really cool.
I don't know if I could.
I think there's a movie out there called Vantage Point.
Vantage Point?
Yeah.
That's like that?
Where it's like there's a terrorist thing that happens, and the movie cuts from like 6 or 7 different perspectives throughout, and it plays the same event from all these different perspectives, and it's really cool.
Yeah, because I love books that's like the same story, but each chapter is a different person in the story, and so you kind of like see all their different personalities. But
there you go.
I think it would be fun.
Ooh, I look forward to that.
We're on to 3 books here.
Yeah. If there's any publishers listening right now.
That's great. Cool. Let's dive into some of this. Prior to your book even starting, there is a section that you called the wait list, where you must have reached out to people in your sphere and in your community trying to figure out and gauge what they're waiting for. And it's this list of names and things actual tangible people in your life are waiting for right now. And to me, that was, as someone coming into it, it was really jarring, eye-opening, and profound to step into the book and see you're not alone in your waiting. Like already from before the book has even started, I'm seeing this communal aspect to waiting, and every person's was different. You know, they all had different things they were prioritizing and waiting for, but yet every single person, the waiting period was important and it meant something to them. So where did that idea come from? Or like, as you do that, how did you what were your reactions putting some of that together? Because it can be kind of heavy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will say it kind of started when Living in Wait, this whole idea started out as a blog in 2018. Okay. And I originally had asked people on the blog to submit their own stories. So back then, I had called it the wait list. And so people would submit stuff, or I'd reach out to them and I would kind of ask them just the same set of questions. So very similar idea started when I first started my blog. So then when I was kind of coming together with my book, I had seen another author do something similar. It wasn't the wait list, but it was just this idea of bringing in the community into your book, right? So having them involved, having them share. And I loved the idea, and I was like, well, how can I do that with this? And so that's where that kind of combined thought came together. And you're right. When people submitted, I definitely was careful to say like, hey, I understand this can be a heavy thing for you. This is something sensitive because it's a desire you have that's not being met. Yeah. And so people, I think, are really eager, though, to share that because like you said, they don't want to feel alone in it. And oftentimes I think you do feel alone because there can be shame around waiting and why things aren't coming into your life. So maybe you don't vocalize it to people you know or in your circle. Sending it like that more anonymously, I think, gave them an opportunity to voice it, to say, hey, I really do have something that I wish would happen that affects me daily, but maybe I'm not communicating it to people. So it made me feel not alone as well. Like just that people could relate to this idea of waiting and how heavy it can feel sometimes. And just, it is a real thing, right? Yeah. Like this isn't something that, sometimes you hope you don't make up something when you try to teach people or share your story with people. And having that just kind of reminded me like, this is something that people relate to. I'm not alone in my fact that I experienced it too. These people felt the same way. Yeah. It gives some purpose behind your book that you are addressing a need, and it's something people are wrestling with, which I think is also awesome. Yeah, yeah. Before each chapter, you write a quote or something along. Sometimes it's a Bible verse, which I guess is a quote in its own vein. What's one of those that as you were working through the book that was profound to you then and is still impacting your life now as you think about waiting and being this author? What's one of those quotes? I'm a big quote guy. Yes, like I love quotes too. If I could live off of like quotes in the Bible, like I think I could make it. Yeah. Right? There's so much that can be gathered from it. And I think what some of it is they're short and they're easy to remember too, which helps you come back to them. So to answer that question though, mine is on page 9 and it's from C.S. Lewis, and it says, "You will find that the long wait has done you some kind of good which you would not have had otherwise." Very hard to swallow, I think. Yeah. And I say that because good and waiting maybe feels like they don't fit in the same sentence. I've learned a lot about emotions and how they can be right? Good and bad in the sense of that. And so I feel like that just was my reminder for me, like, hey, you're going through this season of waiting. There is something, I think the word purpose is really what I would come to mind. Maybe I don't see it. Maybe I don't understand it. Maybe I won't even find it for years down the road. But I feel like that gave me some hope. Right? Like hope to know that this time isn't wasted, because I think a lot of times we say waiting is wasted, right? Like if I'm waiting, I'm wasting my time. Yep. And so I think that reminds me, and hopefully those listening, that there is still purpose. Maybe we in our own right can't understand it, but it still exists within that. That's great. Yeah. So good. I think is why I like that part. But hey, I have a question for you though, to go back. We had talked about some waiting, about the wait list. Do you guys have something that you would put on the wait list? Ooh. I know that's putting you on the spot. And like we said, sensitive and can be kind of heavy. But I should say this. I think waiting often is maybe seen as a disappointing thing because there's a void. But I do feel like sometimes that waiting can be, there can be some excitement attached with it. I feel like sometimes, maybe not as much, right? Like maybe 20-80 in the percentage world of that. But so it could be something too exciting that you're waiting for. Yeah. Like maybe it is a family or a wedding or writing a book. I mean, my book was something exciting, but even with that, I had some difficult times. Yeah. Absolutely. Even when I was in it, that I was still being grown. And so anyway, I just was curious if you had something to share. No, totally. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I'm single, but I very much want to be married and have a family. So I feel like that's something I'm waiting on.
Yeah, definitely. There you go.
And I think there's something for me that is, I'm content in the waiting. So it's still a waiting game for me, and it's probably kids. I've got a lot of friends. I'm in a community right now where a lot of us got married around the same time, and there's a lot of kids popping up. It's like I went to a party the other day with some friends, and it was like six kids under the age of 1, and I was like, I'm definitely not having kids now. You know what I'm talking about? But there's a contentness in that. I'm still waiting, but I'm not disgruntled. And so it's a different kind of waiting, but still something that the Lord is teaching me what it looks like to be content, to to not compare different situations, to take the joy that he's given me in this season and really just hold on to that.
Yeah, that I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that is the part that I hope people can get from this idea of living in the wait is you kind of have some sort of contentment in it. You said disgruntlement. I was like that at the very beginning. Yeah. I mean, I was angry. I was resentful. I mean, it was just like push, repeat. It was kind of what ended up happening for me, and took 2.5 years to really understand that, like contentment, acceptance, and that sort of thing. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's possible to have during that time. And I think is possible when you invite God into that and work with him through it.
That's good.
I feel like.
Super good.
Super good. I'm going to jump ahead.
Go ahead.
Still a question. So you talk a little bit about like an unexplained diagnosis of infertility. Yes. And you shared this really profound quote. You say, control has a not so funny way of creating a false sense of safety. And I found myself no longer feeling safe in my own story. The control I thought I had over this outcome in my life no longer existed. It was such a helpless and hopeless feeling to a level I had never experienced before. That appointment was the beginning of a loss that God would work to turn into a gain over the next couple of years. That's just a cool little moment that you had there. But
brings me back actually to like where I was at when that all happened. So.
Yeah, and there's a ton in that, but maybe to start, like, describe what you mean by a false sense of safety that control creates.
Yeah. So I feel like control, like when we are certain of something, I feel like there's safety in it, right? So like if we're certain of, I mean, there's lots of things in our lives, but if we feel like we know this path or we know this direction or we know the outcome, I feel like it feels safer, right? Because we know like this is going to happen. And I feel like for me, for that was like, I had a path, I had a direction, I had something that I thought was safe. And then I got switched to a different one. And I didn't know, I think a lot of it was, I don't know what to do, right? I think my personality and humans as well, though, we like to know what to do. We like to know what's next. We like to have a plan, a checklist, a task list, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, the control piece. And I didn't have it anymore because I was like, well, what do we do next? Like, I don't know what to do, because there was no more certainty for me, right? Like, in theory, I knew what the next step would have been if my life would have went according to plan. But now it's like, okay, this isn't going, you're telling me the typical things you do aren't working. So now what do I do? It's a whole new world. Yes. And I just felt I didn't have any control. It just felt really uncertain, unsafe. Just that whole experience did really. Yeah. From that perspective.
I can sometimes be a visual thinker. And so let me see if I can articulate what I'm kind of processing through even as you talked about it. But in my mind, it's like we're on this destination, we're traveling from point A to point B, we're in the car, we're driving, but all of a sudden the route we normally take or the route we expect to take, which is comfortable and safe, it's road close signs. And you hit that and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take this detour route. And that detour route takes you into new territory. Yep. It takes you into areas you don't normally explore. It makes you see things and experience things that can be confusing. And ultimately, you're still hoping you get to point B, right? Yep. You left point A, so you're going somewhere.
You can't go back.
Yeah, you can't go back. You're going somewhere, but it's through that detour, that sense of like, this isn't normal for me. I don't know if I'm okay with this. It's uncomfortable. It's different, but yet I am still progressing towards something and trusting that the Lord is leading me on that path, even when I don't feel like I'm in control anymore.
Yes. Very well said.
Yeah. That's just mentally, I was going there. I was like, good. I'm seeing you drive through like the mountains, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, you're in the wilderness now. And you're like, I am pioneering something new, like gravel roads and bumps and hills. And you're like, oh, this is crazy, but I'm trying to believe.
And you feel like you're alone. A lot of, in that, I mean, I feel like a lot of us experience different types of waiting. Themes or topics are different. And, ours was to have a family. And at that time, I still feel like it's kind of taboo to talk about it, but I didn't really know anybody else that had experienced it. Not even in my own family personally. Maybe they had and they hadn't shared it, right? I mean, there is some of that happens too. But one of the coolest things I'll say when we did share our story publicly, because like I said, I started a blog and we shared just what we were experiencing, the outpouring of people who said we had something very similar. Yeah. Like I could not believe it, right? Like I never guessed. I didn't want to guess or judge anybody in their timeline of life. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, all these people did. And it was sad to know that they also experienced it. So my heart hurt for them too, because I know what it felt like. Yeah. But I was grateful to know that I had this community of people that were like, yeah, hey, I hear you. I'm right there with you. And
That's
I see
beautiful.
you.
Yeah.
let's clarify. I feel like we jumped over that step of really what caused you to write the book.
We did.
You know, we're in it. Yeah, we're in it, and we're like, so what caused you? What was your waiting moment? What was your wait list?
Yeah, so ours was to have a family. It was to expand our family, to be able to get pregnant and become a mom was really what it was. And so for us, it was where all of this kind of came into play, I'll say, is that until I had this moment where living in the way it really became apparent to me, and God shared with me, it was like a 2.5 year process. So I do think that's important to share for those listening, that this isn't coming to this idea of being willing to live in the weight and that sort of thing can be a process in itself, right? I mean, and all of us happen and come upon that timeline differently because of our relationship with him, context in our lives. And so I encourage you that, I hope that has an encouragement for people listening too, though, is knowing that that point will come, and trust that he will bring you to that moment where you are willing to say, okay, God, I'm ready to live in the weight now, and be content and be willing to learn and grow in this season. So ours, in a nutshell, was to have a family.
Yeah.
Started it all. But I will say I've had plenty more after that. And I think that's important to say, because oftentimes I may be hesitant to exactly share everything about our story, because I don't want people to close themselves off to say, I didn't wait to have a family, and I'm glad you didn't. This idea is something that we will encounter over and over again, right? And that's not to scare us. I feel like it's to help prepare us in a way so that we know kind of what we can do during that time that might be different, to not always be angry and resentful, but maybe find some of that contentment during that time.
Why don't we popcorn back some ideas of like what college students and young adults are like wrestling with in their weight. So not to put, maybe we're just helping you address this thing you're waiting for. For me, the first one that comes to mind is like career. Yeah. Like people are waiting to get that job, to get the job they like. They're in a job, but they're trying to wait for another job.
There's that pressure to leave college in a relationship that's going to lead to marriage, or already be married. And
Friends, I think, is a big waiting period a lot of people experience. I remember coming to college, I really, really wanted friends, but there was a period of time where where the Lord was actually teaching me. He was forming me. He was shaping me. He was making me the person I needed to be so that I could connect with the friends that I'd been praying for.
Yeah. I think that's even bigger too with young adults who are post-college, is that waiting for friendships and community, because it's a very different season.
Waiting in that.
Definitely. Or healing. I mean, I think there's some of those like tangible things, but I when I sit back and think about it, it's like that healing part too, whether it's relationships or family or physically. I mean, there can be a lot of healing that you're kind of feeling like, once I get to that point, then I can do blank or X. So kind of waiting for that to come, I think too. Financially, I think is something too. Right?
Yeah, that's real.
I mean, it's real. I feel like no matter what age you are. I'm way post college, but I feel like that's a big thing too, of waiting, of like just that, right? You talk about certainty and stability. I feel like, and the control that comes, and often during that time, you maybe don't know that. You know?
Yeah. I think even some practical things, waiting on location, like city, trying to figure out moves, trying to figure out, just some of those just practical things where you have to wait and you got to take your time and be slow and hard.
Yes.
But good.
It's very hard.
In that same paragraph that Jaena had read previously, you described some emotions that you felt going through this process. Some of them that I'll just recap were like loss of control. There was a little bit of fear in that. There was some helplessness, or the other word, hopelessness. In the midst of that, emotions are something as people we feel powerfully. There's something that even if you're not as in tune with your emotions, you're still feeling them. You're just trying to work through how do you process them and vocalize them. And in that, they're powerful, they're pertinent. What do we do with them? You know, you're feeling some of this negative stuff, but you're trying to live faithfully in the wait. How would you say and encourage people to process and work with their emotions within the waiting period?
Yes, that's a really great question. And I feel like I didn't have a good grasp on that at the beginning. And that's where I kind of said, like, I learned that a little bit, that it can be like you can be sad and happy, where I honestly thought it was one or the other. Right. And through that, it was like, oh, they can be both. But I think with that is, I think those feelings dictate or share with you a need that maybe you're having in your life that isn't being filled, I think. So I feel like if you can be curious about maybe what you're feeling, not judgmental, but be curious about, okay, right now, why am I feeling upset, or why am I disappointed, or why am I feeling,
so good.
comparison, right? I think comparison happens a lot in the weight. Yeah. If you can say like, well, why am I feeling that jealousy right now? And then as you step back and break it down, I think it just helps you understand like what's that need that you're really wanting and missing. It's not necessarily about maybe that person or what they have. It's what you wish you had in your own life. And so I feel like using them as a tool for that can be really helpful. I especially during difficult times, I don't recommend pushing them down or avoiding them or ignoring them, because I think they are trying to communicate to us. So I would say using that as a tool. And for me, I think writing down some of that, journaling, maybe you like to do it as a voice note. I mean, I think there's ways to express that out. And I think as you talk that through as humans, it helps us learn and decide like, oh, maybe it's this or this. Talking to a trusted friend. Trusted. I like to say trusted because especially, and I know that can be really hard. You even talked about that, like in that stage, maybe for those listening, maybe they don't have a really trusted friend. And I understand what that feels like. Cause you're like, I want someone to share this with, and I don't have someone. And so you can talk to me, you can find me online if you want, if you feel like you trust me. Cause I know how important it is just to have one other person to say, this is kind of what I'm thinking or feeling. So, and I do think those feelings help us better understand ourselves, our motives, maybe what our expectations are in our lives that maybe they aren't as realistic or unrealistic, I should say, for ourselves can kind of relate to that too.
That's good. You want to go for something now, Jaena?
Oh boy, I lost my place in our outline.
Taking a soft course. There's so much to talk about.
Kind of going all over.
Yeah. I think, for you, how would you describe the journey of waiting and the loss, the grief, just that process? How did that play out for you? And like, what encouragement would you give for other people walking through that?
Yeah. So, I'll say this. I think it's recognizing that grief is something that you experience when you lose someone, or something, but like a physical person or an animal or something like that. But I think it's also something you experience when you have a loss of a dream or an expectation or a desire or a plan or a schedule. I didn't realize that. And so I didn't correlate that I was experiencing grief when I was going through this. And that, I think just having that gives awareness and context to maybe how you're feeling, why you're feeling, and I think helps you maybe work through it. And having a name, right? Like having a name to it, I think can help you. And so I think for me, it was understanding this is grief. Like you are sad, you have a loss of something that you wanted. And I think a big piece of that is acceptance, where we understand that, okay, this is where I am in life. I'm not okay with it. I don't like this, but how is there a way through it? And I think there's a quote I share in here from Michael J. Fox that I love about acceptance.
Oh, there you go.
And it says, acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding that something is what it is, and there's got to be a way through it. And so I feel like that's powerful too, of knowing when you're in that time of that loss or that grief, knowing that this is what I'm experiencing. I'm sad. I'm disappointed that I don't have X right now. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have the house. I don't have my healing yet. And yet I can still find purpose or hope I think that acceptance piece gives you hope to work through it. And knowing that it may not be this perfect plan that you had, but it still is a part of your story and can be, I think, redeemed through that process.
That's great.
Yeah.
So good.
So, yeah. Ugh. It's not fun.
No, it's not fun.
Talking about it now, I know it's not fun, but it's something that I hope people who are listening find that and just know that it is possible. Like when you are in a season of waiting, that there is contentment, there's peace, there's still joy, fulfillment that can still be found in it. And through that relationship with God, I think inviting him in, talking about how you're feeling and what you're experiencing. And I think if you know that for me, it was knowing that God is preparing me, he is protecting me and still providing purpose for me. During that time, that really changed it for me, because then it was no longer this time that was just being wasted. It was part of my story that he was weaving all these details in.
Super good.
And strengthen my relationship with him through that, I think.
Yeah.
Another thought that you had talked about in the book, which is you were willing to bargain with God to reveal your future.
Yes, I was. I remember my journal entry.
Right? Like, haven't we all been there? Where it's like, God, if you will tell me I'm going to give up swearing.
Just give me a sign.
If you will give me a sign, I swear I will consecrate myself to you. It's the warfare, the promise, when you're at ends with, and you will make any promise to do anything if God will just blank.
Yes.
So in the midst of that, we trick ourselves and think if we knew the end result or if we knew what was coming, we'd be more willing to wait. Like, God, if I knew you were going to provide me a job, if I knew it was going to be a job I liked, then I would wait more contently. Or like, if I knew there was a spouse coming at some point, then I'd date probably in a healthier way. But right?
Yeah, right?
But it's a lie in a lot of sense, because we're asked to live by faith. There's this aspect of relying and trusting on God. So how did that perspective change in the journal where you were like, okay, I'm bargaining with God, but this maybe isn't the correct way to go about this? How did that shift in your story? And what does that even look like to help us stay present in the wait now?
So honestly, for me, it was realizing that Jesus waited too. I think it made me realize like this is a natural part of life. Like I wasn't being punished. I wasn't a bad Christian. God didn't hate me. This, unfortunately, right? We live in the world that's full of sin, that this is a part of life. And I think knowing that he waited too just brought this like comfort and relief to me in a way of knowing that he understood. I mean, I always knew he understood what we experience in life, but knowing specifically, it was like waiting really touched me, and knowing like, okay, he knows exactly what I'm going through. He understands, he can relate to me. And that I felt like made me just have a deeper relationship with him and trust in him of what I was going through. Yeah. Knowing that he kind of experienced that. So that really shifted my perspective on that. And I think also understanding when I thought about him and waiting and the things that he had to wait for in life, it shifted my perspective in knowing that he also provides protection for us in those times. And you kind of talked about it a little bit, Brennen, where he's preparing you for what's coming next, but we also need protection from maybe getting that too soon because maybe we aren't ready for it. That's kind of maybe a hard thing to think, because I think I'm ready for a lot of things, right? I mean, we probably all think we're prepared for the things, especially we want. So I think like understanding that piece too, it's like, oh wait, God, like you're not withholding this from me because I'm bad or you're upset with me. Maybe it's because you're trying to protect me because you love me, right? We protect people that we love. Yeah. So I think that really shifts just his relationship with us during that time.
That's good. Yeah. And even in that, I think my temptation is, okay, if you're not going to tell me the future plan, at least tell me the things I need to fix now so that I can get to the future plan. Right?
Tell me the steps.
But there's something about it where when we journey alongside God and we find it on our own, he's leading us each step of the way, it becomes more intrinsically valuable to us. Yeah. If God says you need to be a person of higher character, and we like lay that down, he's like, if that will happen, then I'll reward you with this. It feels bait and switchy. But if we are just in an honest pursuit of God, living in the wait, and we recognize that we can develop our character, there's something intrinsically motivating in that says, I'm just trying to faithfully pursue the Father and live and be the person he wants me to be, and then we'll get to the place. But if we want the checklist, then we'll just start checking boxes to try to achieve objectives rather than becoming the people God actually wants us to become. Yeah,
like living by the law versus grace,
absolutely,
right? I mean, the checklist of it's more about that grace and that relationship with him. Yeah, that you can only form, like you said, like by your own self going through that and working through it and having those conversations with him. It has to happen that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the waiting that you experienced, what helped you to realize or remember that God cares about you, to remember that he might be doing this to protect you, or that to trust him even in the midst of not knowing how things are going to go?
Yeah, I think so I talk about it in the book. I think those reminders for me are really what I call the 7 truths that I share in there. And I use it as the acronym WAITING to hopefully help us all to remember. But so I'll just go through them. It's worship, acceptance, investigate, trust. Intentional, new, and then generosity.
There you go.
I was like, there's a couple that I had, the 2 I's that are in there. And so those, honestly, for me, that's what I do to this day. Because like I said, I have been in seasons of waiting since this all got started, and I go back to those every time. And I feel like for a person that, like I said, we like to do things, we like to cross stuff off the list. Like, what can I do? That I feel like gives some sense of control during that time. And these things, I don't share them because it's going to get you to your outcome. I cannot do that. Like, this book cannot do that. Like, that is for God alone to help with that. This in and through those, I feel like, though, helps provide that character development, your relationship with him, your relationship with yourself. I feel like it helps do that refinement for you during that time, and just gives you something, I think, to hold on to that still can bring fulfillment during that time while you are working or navigating towards that outcome that you're wanting.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Let's each do one question left. Does that work, just for time's sake?
Go for it.
The question that I still wrestle with, and I would love to just hear your input on some of this, but there is a temptation to believe the thing we're waiting for, unless we get it, will lack fulfillment.
Yes.
Unless this thing drops in our lap, unless God provides us in this way, my life or even me, it's not complete, right? If you never have the kid, is my life worth it? If I never meet the person, is my life worth it? If I never have the family, if I never get the job, is it still worth doing it? And will I finish my life complete if I never get this? What did that look like for you when you're wrestling, as you were trying to figure out, if I'm never a mom, am I okay with that?
Yeah. And I'd say first, for anybody that's listening that maybe can relate to that, is like living in that maybe unfulfilled desire that you have. First of all, I just want you to know, like, I see you, my heart hurts for you, because that's really hard. And it's something that you deal with every day. And so it matters. And so I just want those listening to know that. And I think for me, what I found out happened that at first it didn't happen. Okay. Like I said, it's 2.5 years, right? So it was definitely something that I had to, God and I were wrestling with this whole time, I feel like. And what I found though, and I remember this feeling, I remember having this conversation, was that through living in the wait and this idea of having community and talking about this topic, I had new life that formed in me. And so it wasn't the new life that I wanted, right? Like to become a mom at that point. That didn't happen for another year after that. But I had a different kind of life, right? Like it wasn't what I planned. It wasn't what I was thinking would happen, but he still brought fulfillment to my life, but in a different way.
That's great.
Through a different avenue. And it didn't replace, right, what I wanted to become a mom. It didn't replace it. It was just something new he had brought into my life. And so I can't speak to the fact of not becoming a mom, because I did, right, from that standpoint. But I offer that of that there is, I still feel like some hope that maybe it's a different type of fulfillment, a different new life that he can bring that you would have never imagined. Okay, doing this, writing a book was never on my radar.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this was all something new that he brought to my life.
Yeah.
And I know he can do that through you for others listening today. I don't know what it is specifically. I think it's asking him that, you know, and also talking to him about how you're feeling through that and the disappointment. And it's hard because if it isn't fulfilled, it's always going to be there, right? That hole will always be there. It's always going to be a part of your story. It probably will always be painful. You'll probably never be okay with it. And I think that's where talking to him and working through that with him and a trusted friend to kind of share with that are important things to do. And I wish I could fix it. I really do. I mean, for anybody I talk to, and that's the thing, is we can't, right? And that's hard to accept sometimes. It will, a lot of times, to accept that.
In the book, you even talk about what it means to find true fulfillment, that even if you get the thing, there's always going to be another thing you're waiting for. There's another void to fill. There's another box to check. So finding true fulfillment in Jesus, that we've prompted our people over the last couple of years to ask the question, is Jesus enough for you? And really wrestling with that, because he needs to be. If you never have the satisfaction in career, relationships, life, like Jesus can still be enough for you. If he is all that you have, find that place where you have true fulfillment in him, and that'll be beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's John 10:10 where he says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the fullest. I mean, so I remember I clung to that verse too. I mean, because it's a reminder of that. But that, I think what's hard is that as humans, we think we should be fulfilling the things that we want to fulfill. And God is saying, well, I might have a different plan because it's about him and his kingdom. And oftentimes my stuff isn't. It's about my agenda, what I want, and my directives. And it's like sometimes they don't match. And that, I think, is where inviting him in and having that conversation is so valuable, because then you work together with him on that. I
mean, I can't help but Mark 8 is some of my favorite passage of scripture. And that's exactly the tension playing out there. Is Jesus has asked, who do you say that I am? And Peter steps up to the plate, knocks it out of the park. He's like, you are Jesus. You're the Messiah. You're the Savior. He's like, this has been revealed to you by my Father in heaven. And there's like this mountaintop moment. He gets the answer right. He's all in front of the disciples. It's huge for Peter. And right in the next moment, Jesus declares that he's going to pass away, and he predicts his death. And Peter steps up again, of course, confident. And he says, I won't let this happen to you. And it's in that moment where Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You have no concern over the plans of God, only merely human concerns. So it's this reality that Peter had what he thought was correct plans. He had this path, this trajectory for Jesus to become the king, to become the Lord, to be the guy. And Jesus had a different plan from the Father, and they had to reconcile those two. And Peter fights with that all the way through the resurrection. I mean, you finish John, Peter is still downtrodden in the fact that Jesus did not become the guy he thought he was supposed to be. Yet the Father's plan of crucifixion and resurrection was so much better than whatever Peter could ever imagine. Yet it took him time to wait and to learn that.
Yeah. Oh.
Sorry. Mark 8 soapbox. Anytime right? I can.
There's nothing more.
That's it.
There's nothing more to say.
Yeah. I'll kind of bring us home. So your book, Living in the Wait, but then also just the process of living in the wait, is ultimately about trusting God and what he's doing in the midst of the waiting. And so in some final thoughts, what encouragement would you give to people listening for how that they can better continue to trust God in the midst of the waiting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the first thing I would say is surprise. It's not instant, right? Okay. So it's a process, right? This trust with God. I mean, it's like any type of relationship. It's not something that's instant. And I do feel like when we go through these difficult times, we stand to gain the most. So I'd say seasons of waiting or difficult times, I feel like can often be the same, or feel the same, because we have nothing left to lose. Yep. And I feel like that's where we can stand to gain the most in our relationship with God, about ourselves, and trusting him and through that. And I think the one that I love the most is that, I share this in the book, it's from Ernie Johnson, had in his book. He said, are you going to trust God with a question mark or with a period? And I don't think I said that right. I'll have to look that back up. But basically what he's saying is like, are you going to trust God because you get what you want? Or, like trust God, like I'm going to trust God, or is it like I'm going to trust God, period? Like whether I get what I want or I don't get what I want, regardless. And I really resonated with that because mine was with the question mark. It really honestly was. And then realizing like, okay, it's about trusting him, period. Trust God, period, with that. And I think one thing that helped me trust, or I think dig into or understand this trust more, was Mark 11:24, what says, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And that was a turning point for me where it was like, I'm going to believe in this, believe before I see anything from you, God. And I think that helped deepen my relationship with him because I wasn't trusting him for something I already saw. It was, I was trusting you for something that I'm hoping you'll provide. And we're going to trust each other through that process. Because like I said, we didn't know what was going to happen. And I think when you trust him, when you can't see that, it feels different, right? Because you're truly trusting him because you don't have the control. You can't see what's going on. He's got the detail and the plans, and stepping into that. So I'd say those listening, maybe check out that verse and just think of how you can pray to God in expectation for what you're desiring. And I feel like watch your relationship change with him.
Yeah, so good. I don't remember which chapter in Daniel, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I've always been drawn so deeply to their prayer because there's this confidence and this expectation Jesus teaches. And they pray, we know you can and we believe you will. But then they finish with this submission too that says, but even if you don't. And that kind of sums up some of what we've talked to. There is a confidence we can bring to prayer that says, God, I believe you'll do this. I believe you can and I believe you will. Yet there's this submission we hold in tension that says, but even if you don't, I will still worship you because you're still God and you're still faithful and you're still trustworthy. And so it's the beauty of confident expectation, submission, that together in that melting pot is the faith that he has asked us to live by. Hard, but beautiful.
Yeah, that's perfectly said.
Well, there you go. Thanks for tuning in, for catching up with us, and for meeting Melissa. Again, you can get her book, Living in the Wait, I think on Amazon or pretty much anywhere books are sold. I feel like that's a cliche. But yeah, she's probably a great social media follower, someone to catch up with. You can check her out, her website or different things like that, and get in contact with her. But we've enjoyed having you on. It's been awesome.
Thank you. I loved it.
Yeah. Peace out. See you, Oasis.